I believe that every movie adheres to the 29-point story structure. No matter if the writer outlines first or dives in blind, the end product follows the same 29 beats. The Queen's Gambit is my Exhibit J. You might be screaming, but this is an adapted miniseries, while this channel focuses on feature films. And yes, you're right, except that the scripts were written as one overarching story, which follows the prescribed structure. And it's newish, so I went with it. The most notable difference is that sequence length lasts 15 minutes rather than the average 4. This allows for deeper character immersion and time for stunning cinematography. But the story itself remains structured. Let's begin. A tight focus on the core elements of the protagonist's personality, inner conflict, and situation. The car wreck, which changed what Beth could have been into what she will become. The orphanage, where the missing pieces of her budding personality are filled in. Her magic vitamins, and the start of a torrid affair with addiction. And of course, chess. Where, why, and how the protagonists exist in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Beth pushes her way past Mr. Scheibel's reluctance to play a stranger, to teach a girl. She suffers through many sober nights for the reward to psychedelically explore chess in her solitude. Even in her basement of safety, her prodigious talent overwhelms her mentor. A singular event that's never happened before, and is destined to lead the protagonist away from their status quo. Mr. Scheibel hands Beth control over her future. At 9 years old, she's a prodigy. And a junkie. An examination of what's different in light of the something new, what's the same in spite of it in relation to the status quo. She continues to progress beyond what Mr. Scheibel can teach. State law cuts off her spigot of talent pills, and she faces the unknown, learning while sober. Her prodigious talent provides an avenue of locales outside the orphanage, and, most importantly, to many new opponents. And this confident young slayer has tasted the drug of winning. The discovery that things are less than ideal, or an exploration of how badly things are. After 6 years, Beth is finally adopted into a shaky household. She's an outcast among her peers, due largely to the luxuries she's never experienced, like trendy fashion and bedrooms. And without chess, she holds no control over her life. The protagonist dedicates their effort to a specified goal, which is smaller in scope than the primary objective that dominates the third act. Beth longs to submerge herself in chess, and plots out her first tournament appearance with a freshly stolen magazine, and the re-emergence of her talent pills almost feels fateful. In fresh form, she powers through the embarrassment of being a newbie and takes her first steps of her professional life. A brief checklist of the story elements needed for the second act. Chess wizards turned mentors. This expression from confident dude bros. The coming of age milestones for every girl. Portraits of vice and wasted potential. Revelations of Beth's home life in her waning months. Always punching upward. And, oh yeah, addiction. The singular event that launches the protagonist into the wild jungle of the second act, also called an oh shit moment. Mama Alma takes the show on the road as Beth's mother, her manager, and her dependent. Ooh, shit. The protagonist must learn all new rules and expectations distinct to this adventure. Out-of-state tourneys lure out national talent with world-class egos, a new form of chess for Beth to learn. She receives a brief education in the greater chess world, including how to get European invitations. And Mama Alma stakes her claim to a share of the prize money, while they both adapt to a life of travel and luxury. The protagonist showcases their ability to grow in the areas this adventure requires, typically through external means. Beth's growing national fame trickles back home, where she goes from outcast to party freak. Off camera, she pulls a glow up, revealing a year's worth of tourney wins has transpired. Now she's aiming for prestige. Then she dabbles her feet in the age-old tradition of flirting with a flirtatious boy. Characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Beth begins to mirror Alma, the beautiful disaster with a smile. Benny clues her into a weakness she never saw, shaking her confidence before the US Open. Then he does to her what she does to others, and forces her first to resign. An escalation of problems that vex the protagonist. Teenage hormones and partying, a taste of true independence to contrast her teenage home life. Alma confesses to altering Beth's itinerary for her own purposes, rendering her powerless in the decision. And the level of competition at her first international tourney only reminds her of the global talent she's careening toward. The protagonist evolves internally by utilizing everything they've gathered and learned. Beth studies her opponents like Benny studied her, adapting her strategy accordingly. She embraces relaxation, and so begins to build her inner circle. Then her adaptive, cerebral, brutal approach is tested when she faces a child genius like she was, and she learns how to play off the board to throw off Russian discipline. Journey-weary characters reconcile the reality of their ongoing situation with who they were in the first act. Borgov analyzes Beth down to her orphanage, including her addictive yet survivalist personality, and the first painful lesson Mr. Scheibel ever taught re-emerges in her first game against Borgov. Unfiltered, unimaginative discipline wins out over savage, prodigious talent. The death of Alma leaves Beth without a family, alone again. A singular event strikes at the protagonist's core conflict. Pills and booze in hand, she salutes the past with the vices she's collected along the way. Characters find a safe harbor that also provides needed answers for both external and internal conflicts. Beltic replaces Mr. Scheibel as her long overdue mentor. Beth struggles with loneliness in the house she was adopted into, and she's handed the playbook to learn Borgov like he learned her. The clarified objective is realized in part or in whole, though it's meaningless without the completion of the primary objective. An awkward though safe romance shines a light on Beth's struggle with suburban normalcy. She properly submerges herself in chess, but it's loaded with anxiety about facing Borgov again. She charges through the next tourney, but she's destined to face Benny, who whooped her like Borgov. An existential conflict that wounds the protagonist's sense of self, worldly identity, and their journey. Beth dabbles in a little speed chess, but loses again and again and again. After an off-screen redemption win, Beth realizes she's closer to Borgov than she thought, and Benny volunteers as the next Mr. Scheibel. An undeniable win for the protagonist, typically in direct connection to the rebirth. Beth receives tutelage from a top player in the country. She proves herself against a mod squad of top players in the format she died in earlier, speed chess. A grand loss directly connected to the protagonist's newfound inability to quit the journey. She tips her hand about speaking Russian, to play off board again. But at Borgov's level, that's just information. Her short-lived sobriety crumbles in the presence of her bob-cut lady crush, and compromises everything she's worked for. Then she spends most of her chess winnings to keep her independence, her home. A thematic freefall tied directly to the heavy price. Indulgence in renovating the house leads to indulgence of every kind. She barely keeps it together for a local tourney, then bails before it starts. A singular event that robs the protagonist of seemingly any chance of success. In the tail end of a freefall, she shuts herself away from the world, and the woman who taught Beth how to weaponize her high returns to the fold. The protagonist cannot return to their starting persona, and must turn to face the primary objective. Beth and Jolene literally conduct a tour of Beth's childhood, touching on the main events that led her to what and who she is now. In the basement where it all began, she gazes upon her past, upon the orphan's future. Mr. Scheibel gave her this life. The protagonist moves toward the climax while utilizing the major swings and sneaky misdirections of the story. Beth hustles for the money to get into a chess tourney. Someone connected to the orphanage fronts her the money, making Jolene the new Mr. Scheibel. She jets to an exotic new locale, and she advances in quick fashion, giving the ultimate chess dude bro that same damn expression. the final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonistic force. Beth plays against the oldest, most experienced player in the field, who is overjoyed to anoint her as the best chess player he's ever competed against. And she did it sober. This singular event where the protagonist finally confronts their place in the status quo. Sober, she flushes the pills. She makes the decision that none of her mother figures could make, to not risk her potential. The direct aftermath of the climax, the cinematic denouement, if you will. Clear-eyed and clear-minded, Beth confronts Borgoff for the magical third time, and it's a whole new game. The consequences of the climax in relation to other characters in the status quo. Town steps from the shadows like he's in Sherlock cosplay, and he reveals the assortment of chess talent just aching to help her strategize against the Borgoff, and also to prove that Beth has been creating a family this whole time, yes, but also they're vicariously playing against the Borgoff from a shitty New York basement. I want to be in that room. A tight focus on the protagonist contrasted from the opening. Beth harnesses her abilities and sees the game sober like she only could while intoxicated. Or overwhelming stress and her sudden sobriety causes a psychotic snap. It just depends on how literally you want to translate her sealing practice. And she becomes the champion. She asked the Russian prodigy earlier, what will he do after he becomes world champion? He had no answer. And it looks like we'll never know Beth's either. And there you have it. My 10th example to support my argument that all movies follow the exact same story structure, regardless of how the writer approaches their craft. Despite its almost 7-hour runtime, The Queen's Gambit doesn't meander at all from the 29-point story structure. But does this chess-laden miniseries follow the same plot beats as a Will Hunting sequel that doubles as a Space Nerds version of Home Alone? Yes, it arguably does. Next on my docket, The Martian. Please subscribe to stay up to date with this and future videos, and please like and comment with your thoughts and reactions. I'll talk to you next time.